no matter what you feel about this ending, to me, it doesn't take away the journey we went on. I have a friend who is starting Attack on Titan for the first time. Just finished watching season 1. Hasn't yet started season 2, but he will eventually. And as the last chapter came out, the leaks and all that sort of stuff, and my other friend and I, we were discussing it, and he said, don't even bother. You might not even want to bother, even continue watching the show, watching Attack on Titan. And that was a similar thing we ended up telling him when it came to Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones season 8. Like, that is a season of television that legitimately ruins the character arcs and the whole entire plot setup for every single character and event throughout the entire series. It is truly a season of television that sabotages all of the great work that came before it. And I had to stop there. In our little group chat, and I had to tell him, I said, I think that's a bit of an over-exaggeration comparing it to Game of Thrones season 8, right? When it comes to the ending of Attack on Titan. Because despite whether you do or don't like this ending, I truly feel that Attack on Titan and the work that Isayama did and all the amazing studios did for the anime is truly a masterclass in every sense of the word. When it comes to the writing, when it comes to the music and the animations, like truly the work that went in to bringing Attack on Titan to life is absolutely incredible. And I truly think that it is a story that we as writers and we as people who enjoy, even just enjoy consuming content. But anybody who is a creative, anybody who loves storytelling, whether it's experiencing it or actually telling stories themselves in whatever medium they prefer, can truly learn so much from reading this story or watching the anime. There's just genuinely so much to learn. And I think there is a lot to be proud of. And no matter what you feel about the ending, I think everything that comes before still stands on its own 2 feet as some of the most engaging, most well-written pieces of storytelling ever conceived, with some of the greatest hidden yet planned, in-your-face plot twists, right? I think Attack on Titan's legacy is still intact. I think that the issue that comes with the Attack on Titan ending, I think there are some plot holes. I think there are some issues with it just feeling rushed in general. I think whether you do or don't love it, when it comes to the ending, it feels like we needed at least one more chapter to explore everything that just happened. Because it kind of reminds me of, it's like the same thing I said about Devilman Crybaby. I know, random suggestion, random thing to bring up, but I remember when I was doing my review for the the ending of that show, I said it feels like it needs one more episode because in the climax of the story, it just goes, and then some years passed. And I'm like, what? I just don't like it when stories do that at the end. And they're like, and then some years passed and things were great. And it's like, we painstakingly go through so many eras of exploration of who these characters are and what they went through and every single painstaking thing. Like, we can spend entire arcs for things that take place over 2 days, but it's like, we're only going to spend half a panel on something that happened over the course of 3 years. Yeah, but despite all that, I truly think, like I said, the legacy is intact. I think the overall thing that kind of poisons the overall reflection of the body of work really comes down to just social media in general. You have most of Twitter, which seems to only care about, oh, I ship Annie and blah, blah, blah. I ship Mikasa. I want to see Eren and Mikasa together and da, 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 da. And I care about relationships in this TV show that really doesn't care about romantic relationships, or this anime or manga, what have you. And then this other side that wants to be very critical and analytical of every single detail and theorizing and coming up with as many crazy plot twists and theories as they possibly can when it comes to like almost like the Reddit side of things. And I think what we ended up losing focus of is just kind of what was the story that Isayama wanted to tell. And for the most part, generally, I was on board with what he was trying to do. You can feel a big shift in the story during the second half of the final arc, right? When the rumbling actually starts, there's a shift towards Isayama's true goal, which is kind of blurry, right? I feel like the details of what he was trying to say about humanity and love and kind of exemplifying the thing that Kenny says before he dies about, you know, we're all a slave to something. I think that's what he was trying to go for, but it just gets a little muddled in the details. And then you mix that in with the literal gasoline that is social media and just like the lit match that is the opinions of the internet, and it engulfs and becomes this big hodgepodge mess, and it makes it very hard to make clear the details that we're supposed to be paying attention to, right? And overall, did I like the ending to Attack on Titan? No. But yes. I genuinely liked everything up until the last chapter. And the only reason is because I just felt like before that last chapter came out, I didn't have any expectations, you know? I've never had expectations for when it came to Attack on Titan. For me, it was just something that was always recommended to us, just like this wild roller coaster to go on. That's what it felt like. It was this roller coaster. I've never been the type of person who's, when it came to watching this show or reading the manga, had this idea of like, this is how the grand scheme of things should be. This is how the story should unfold for me. Bars. Don't hate the player, hate the game. But coming into that last chapter, I was just kind of perplexed at what he was trying to say all along. And that was the most interesting, that was the thing that was most interesting to me going into it. I was like, what does Isayama want to say? You know, because it feels like it evolves as the show is going on. And when you're writing something for over a decade, you know, it can change as you go along, what your message is. And, you know, for me, it kind of, the story spoke to me, you know, not looking at any message boards or not really looking at anything else. Like, it kind of stuck out as this like anti-war story, this thing of like, maybe the Titans kind of represent nukes or nuclear warfare, and it's like, you know, what ends up happening in the end is that, you know, everyone just ends up dying and everyone just tries to create more weapons to surpass other people's weapons. You know, that's kind of what it felt like to me. But you know, it's kind of the vibe I was getting from the story and where it was going to go, and this idea that war is hell, and there's a lot of different themes floating around. And I think at the end, Isayama didn't quite stick the landing on a particular theme, right? If I were to sit here and tell you what Attack on Titan was about after reading the final chapter, it's about a lot. It's about war and freedom. And what in particular it's trying to say is a little bit unclear. And I think that it comes down to certain details, where certain character arcs. I think that the two reasons why it doesn't quite pan out for me in that ending is because of everything that happens with Eren and everything that happens with Ymir. For the most part, everything else that happens in the story, I'm pretty much fine with. I love what they did with Levi. That legitimately had me crying in the first 10 pages, or however many pages, when I saw Levi doing the salute to everybody else who had sacrificed, you know, their lives to get as far as they did. That had me in tears, all right? That had me going. And the idea of, you know, 80% of the population is gone, which, you know, going to war with 20% of the population is a big difference between 80%, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Between 80 and 20 is different. But breaking down the two elements that kind of didn't quite feel right were Eren and Ymir. Is it Amir or Ymir? I think it's Ymir. Can't remember. Eren is a difficult character to analyze now. But is genuinely one of the most, even still after reading it, one of the most fascinating anime protagonists, because I genuinely don't think we'll ever see anyone like an Eren Yeager ever again. Someone who is so genuinely flawed, yet very interesting and powerful, and he's so many things, right? And my opinion of Eren Yeager as a character has drastically changed over the course of the years I've been attached to this story. I remember when I watched the first season of Attack on Titan, I hated Eren. I thought he's top 10 worst, if not number one worst anime protagonist of all time. I was like, he just sits there, he cries and gets kidnapped, and he cries some more. Like, that's all he does. He's the worst thing about this show. Season 2, he cries, he gets kidnapped, he loses every fight. He is the worst thing about this show. And as things kept progressing, and then by the time you get to the time skip in Marlin, I was just like, okay, Eren's kind of getting better at the end of season 3. He's just kind of realizing, like what I realized, he's kind of useless, right? And then by the time you get to what happens with Marley and the invasion arc and all that sort of stuff, it just dawned on me, like, oh, brain explosion. We've been setting up for Eren to be the villain, right? We've been setting up for Eren this whole entire time, this rhetoric of like, you have a protagonist who is constantly like, I'm going to kill every single last one of you and commit genocide and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, Goku wouldn't say that, but that's, this isn't your typical shonen protagonist. Those aren't fluffy words. He's just like, I'm going to rip out every bone in your body. You're like, okay, Eren, that's not what nice guys say. But it's like, realizing that mentality of revenge and that desire for revenge and that quote unquote desire to be free was what was motivating him throughout the whole entire story, right? And carrying him all the way through. And you realize, you're like, oh, this is setting the groundwork for the twist, because all that hatred and all that evil and all that just desire to get back at them, and this feeling of being useless and constantly being kidnapped, and all your friends die for you, but you're still useless. You can't even plug a hole in a wall. You can't harden your skin. All these things are supposed to compound to make him the most interesting villain possible, right? And when the twist happens, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is what they were setting up the whole time. And now he's driven in a different way. And you're like, but what is truly his motivation now? And I think like that mystery of who Eren has become had become so interesting and so enticing. But I think the true pitfall of it is when you start adding time travel to the mix. That's where it just, the element of time travel and them not having, or Isayama not spending enough time developing how his fully works and to what extent and how far back he can have effects on things is it's troublesome, right? It's troublesome because it comes off as, okay, if you have the Attack Titan, you're all linked to a certain degree where your memories can bleed into one another, right? But then by the final chapter, we get this realization that Eren at some point has developed, whether it's, having the founding Titan, well, it's been since the beginning, but having the coordinate inside of him as well, maybe mixed in with the Titan power of perception of time being distorted. At some point he gained the power of influence, whether it was towards the end of the series or in the middle of when he first gets his powers, who knows? But at some point in this perception of time, he was able to directly influence events, whether it's talking to his father, convincing him to kill some bibis, and or in this case, sending some form of signal or message to Dina, Grisha's ex-wife, sending her to go eat his current mom, his actual mummy. You see my brain breaking as I was trying to explain that? Because, like, as I'm saying it out loud, it's like... And then his motivation, though, was to start the rumbling, but not fully go 100% with killing everybody, so that to the remaining percent of people who would be alive, Armin and everybody else with Armin would seem like the heroes, but deep down he knows that no matter what happens, humanity will be at war with each other, because that's just what humanity does, and that's its base nature. Okay. So it sets them up to be the heroes, because he sees all the time, he understands this, he knows his role. And then he goes and does this, but he makes sure that they win, but he knows that that timeline, but he knows that humanity's still not going to accept them, and that, you know, the future is up to them now. But he takes away their ability to become titans. One, because that's, you know, that's why, maybe it's because it's why people hate them, it's the curse. But at the same time, it's one of the best ways to defend themselves. But he takes that away, and now it's possibly them versus 20% of the population, because inevitably they're going to want retribution. And he wanted to be with Mikasa the whole entire time, even though at certain parts he doesn't act like it. And even using the benefit of the doubt that at certain points that up to a certain point of his childhood, like he just does not affect his child version of himself, or his a teenage version of himself. Like, it just goes from when he kisses his hand and onward, basically, is when everything just fully becomes clear to him. But he wanted to be with Mikasa the whole time, and he's upset because he can't be with her, even though he had ample opportunity to show her that he cares. You see what I mean? Time travel messes up everything. Like, it just becomes so muddled, and just in those simple details of what they added in the final chapter of him saying that he sent Dina, just in that simple act alone of he kills his own mom, right? He betrays his brother, he manipulates his father, he doesn't confess to the woman he loves, but he wants the opposite in all of these situations. It gets a little murky how much Eren is in control and how much he is a passenger in this story. And that's kind of the sad thing. It's like, well, it's a time loop. Like, he's stuck in a time loop, but it's like, so in this time loop, he's actually able to choose for Dina not to eat Big B, right? He tells Dina not to eat Big B and to go eat his mom, right? But is that act in and of itself, you know, is that act free will, or is it a part of the time loop? But it's not free will. It's just a part of the time loop. But he knows he's consciously making that decision to make things play out in a certain way. But he can influence the past. But how far back in the past can he influence? Can he influence Ymir and tell her, no, don't go around chasing those pigs? No? Or goes back further? I don't know. And I think that's where things get murky. And yeah, and it's just he went from cold to calculated to like this pitiful child still at the end. And it makes sense because, you know, he didn't really have a chance to grow up. He was just constantly bombarded with responsibility. And then at a certain point, he just becomes a player in the cog of time. And he can control people's memories. And what was up with Historia? It's like she's lesbian, but ends up with a child, or seems to genuinely only be interested in women, but then somehow ends up pregnant, and then, but is obviously very depressed about being pregnant, and still is after the child is born 3 years later, and it's like, why do we keep showing Historia? What was Historia doing? Why'd she become queen? Did she literally just become queen and become pregnant in the plot? Like, what? But yeah, focusing on Eren. It's just, it becomes a question mark of who Eren is at this point and his motivation. Like, we know what it is. It just doesn't feel congruent to every single action that happens, I guess. Right? He wanted to give his friends a chance at freedom. He wanted his friends to truly be free. You know? I think there's a way that works, but I'm not sure it's the way that it was written. And the number of things at the end of the day, there's no change in relationships, right? Like, the final chapter's out. Like, there's no change in any of this. It's just about, it's coping. But it's also discussing this and, you know, analyzing this and like who these characters are now, that and who we know them to be now that the journeys are complete. But yeah, Eren's just this interesting hodgepodge of a whole bunch of stuff. We'll just get back to that later, because it's a big enigma for me right there. Like, it just feels like with Eren, there should have been a better way to accomplish whatever he was trying to accomplish. I just can't think of what it is yet. That's where you guys come in. Like, you know, maybe I'm just crazy, but I genuinely am just a little perplexed by his motivations and his capabilities of his powers, because it's not fully explained. But anyways, yeah, so the other part that bothered me was Ymir. And I've seen this go around a lot. The idea that, because it's presented in the final chapter, that Ymir kept Fritz's orders and was obedient to those orders because he, was it Fritz? I think it was Fritz. I can't remember. But to her abuser, she was obedient to him for over 2,000 years because deep down she actually loved him. Now, I've seen the defense come up. Well, people saying, well, this is a classic case of Stockholm Syndrome. Okay. But for 2,000 years, I mean, like, well, you see the counter argument, well, some people will go their whole lives in abusive relationships. And it's like, that's true. But I want you to really think about how long 2,000 years is. I want you to think about how long that is. To not be bound by a curse or some magical huad or what and all that sort of stuff, and just $2,000 years is a very long time to not think critically at all about your own motivations towards what you're doing and the acts that you're carrying out, the cycle that you're perpetuating. Even though it's very clear she's conscious and she's very clear of having thought and enacting her own plans, because her goal was to get Mikasa to kill Eren. So, you know, well, 2,000 years. People that cut out your tongue and abuse you, force you to breed, and had your children eat your corpse. $2,000 years. I guess so. I don't know. I don't know. I just personally, I guess it's just for me personally, I just don't find Stockholm Syndrome as the appropriate answer to that situation. And I just think overall Isayama and his treatment of women is kind of wishy-washy. In this regard, even when you look at Mikasa, it's like she didn't really grow as much as everyone else did. And you're like, and I could see the argument already of, you know, some of this.
Well, actually, she grew because she killed the man she loved. That's the ultimate growth.
But is it though? It's like, but she never fully, to me, growth would be some form of independence away from Eren. Her entire existence from the moment she meets Eren evolves around him being the center of her world, right? It's not, Stockholm Syndrome. Shut up. And and then it all builds up to this moment. She kills him, and still at the end of the day, what is she doing the whole time? She's sitting there alone 3 years later at his grave, wondering if he's happy, holding on to the scarf. Which, in some ways, if you look at his actions and Eren wanting her to be happy and him pushing her away, is because he knows he has to do terrible things and she has to kill him, and also he wants to separate her from him, and also wants to make sure that once she dies that she is able to move on and live a happy life. So that's why he makes a whole big deal about the scarf, and you're still using the scarf, you're stupid for using the scarf. But then also in the same manga, in the final chapter, he's like,
I wanted her to live with me. She was supposed to be with me. I never said anything or hugged her or told her how I felt besides the dream, but we never had a chance to be together over all those years.
Had all that time. Yeah, he had a lot of time. He's like, oh, but he was busy preparing. Come on, you tell me they were building those railroads, they couldn't take it one night and be like, hey, let's step out, let's talk. I need to tell you something. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know. But anyways, but yeah, so Ymir, I don't get it. I just don't understand that that's what we were building towards all this time. It's a bit strange. So yeah, Mikasa, yes, but in addressing those two, it kind of addresses my other issues I have. You know, Mikasa and Historia. It's just like, what's happening here? What's the point of all that? But yeah, the ending, man, I don't know. Maybe you guys, I want to know how you guys feel. I genuinely want to know how you guys feel and have processed all of this information. Again, I didn't go in with some crazy expectations like I needed this story to fulfill my soul and I needed to be whole as a human being with the final chapter of Attack on Titan. Like, no, I wanted a good conclusion, and I feel like it just feels rushed, right? I don't feel like I'm in deep protest to any of the ideas that are presented, except loving the abuser one. But I genuinely don't feel in protest to any of the ideas that are presented. It just feels like, when I was reading it, like it just didn't feel fleshed out enough. And that these concepts didn't get their proper time to produce the fruits of their labor. Because so much mystery was built up behind how the mechanics of these things work and the motivations of so many characters. And when you save who was your main character throughout the whole entire show and make him disappear for the final act, and then only bring him up for the last chapter, it's just kind of like, I feel like you're inevitably going to set yourself up to either disappoint fans or set yourself up for disaster storytelling wise, because now you have such a limited time, limited space, limited pages to try to explain so much that is so complex and so deeply rooted. And yeah, that's more so how I feel about it. Again, I still think this series is amazing. I think it's wonderful. It was sitting at a 9.5 out of 10 for me. If they had stuck the landing, then it would have been a 10 out of 10 for me. But it's still like a 9. It's still amazing. Like, everything about this is still amazing. The manga's amazing. The anime's amazing. Certain elements, how they are presented in the ending, just don't jive with me. You know what I mean? Like, do I like it? No. Do I hate it? No. I don't hate it. It's just the more I think about it, I'm just like, I don't get it. You know, and you know, for those of you who actually enjoyed the ending, I want to hear from you all. I want to know, like, what about the ending stuck to you? And it's like, I get the ending, and I get what it's saying, and ignoring the plot holes that it brings up with time travel and all that stuff, but I'm not sure I see what the clear picture is thematically. All right. And I think that's where the interesting debate is going to lie, right? What was Isayama trying to say all along? Right? What does this ending do to recontextualize the entire story? In the ways that it does recontextualize it, I don't think it does a good job of doing so. I think there's certain elements in certain character arcs that are just wishy-washy at best. Weak overall. But we'll see. And time will tell where this story ends up standing amongst the rest that are end up told. When all of humanity has fallen, the world turned to dust and our cities are ashes and rubble. I don't know, it's dark. But once time ends, eventually we'll see where things stand. Right now we're living in the time of hyperbole. So everywhere you go on the internet, it's either the worst thing ever that ever happened to humanity, and it's a blight upon existence that this story was ever told, or it is the greatest thing that has ever been told. There are no mistakes. You just don't understand it because your brain is too small. And yeah, it is the story written by the gods, and there's not a single error in it at all whatsoever. But yeah, I genuinely want to know what you guys think. Overall, like I said, I still think we ended up with something great. I still think we have a lot to learn from this series and a lot to learn from re-watching it and rereading it and reanalyzing it. And I think there's a lot of fun, super fun discussions that are being had because of this series, and a lot of character analysis are going to be very, very interesting to watch, which would be very exciting. I'm excited to see what video essays end up coming out because of this. So yeah, guys, very fun. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, go watch some anime. Not Promised Neverland, though. That was trash. That was go watch Promised Neverland. Go watch Kaguya-sama. You feeling depressed? Watch some Kaguya-sama. It's a good show. Love Is War. It's a really good show. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching whatever this video was. I really do appreciate it. With that being said, I don't know when my next video is going to be. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I say every single time I'm back, I don't know, man. Life is what life is. I'm vibing. I'll see what ends up motivating me. And when it does, I'll end up letting you guys know. But with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm Daniel, and don't forget to get geek.